Hey guys, Tim here, back with another episode of the Chicago Northwestern Harvard Subdivision in N-Scale. I'm excited to be back after a multi-month absence. Unfortunately, as I'm sure many of you can relate, work really kept me away from any meaningful hobby time for an extended period of time. But to be honest with you as well, even when I did have some downtime, I kind of talked myself out of working on the layout because I'm at a point, as you're about to see, where I needed to get several not very fun things done to make sure the layout would be in good shape for the future. That was very time consuming and very tedious. And so I just really didn't want to do it. You know, when you're busy working and then you get home, the last thing you want to do is more of what feels like work. But I finally forced myself to, make a commitment that I would do a certain amount of work each night. So that way I could break it up into chunks, make it more manageable, and I was finally able to get over the hump. So I'm excited to show you what I worked on, and also excited to share next steps, because again, now we are starting to get into some major fun developments for the layout. So the first step, obviously getting back in, was to clean up everything. I mean, you're seeing how the layout was when I left it and didn't touch it again for months. So part of it was just cleaning things up, getting back to scratch, ready to roll. The main thing that I had to start off working on after I cleaned everything up and got everything back in storage that needed to get off the tracks was working on finishing getting all the rails painted and away from that, shiny model track look. I had done the first section at the end of the last episode. You can see it in the foreground here in this sped up footage that I had already done it. And I'm breaking it into chunks just again to help make it more manageable. There's roughly 56 feet of mainline run on this level, but obviously there's 3 tracks on the mainline. So what makes it so tedious is I need to paint over 150 feet of track, and hand painting that just wasn't going to work. And so you're seeing part of what makes it so tedious is I've got to lay painter's tape down both on the sides and in between the rails. I got it down to a science. Then I would spray. There's this nice matte brown finish spray paint. I forget what other model railroad channel it was that I picked up on it and recommended it. And then I found the fastest way to then clean off the top of the rails was just to use an abrasive track cleaner. The Pico one works really well. You can see obviously the track in the foreground, it's not concrete ties, so I don't have to worry about doing all the taping. That's really what's tripping me up is, I've seen other people that just paint over the concrete ties directly. The problem with that is I don't want to do that because in the story of the layout, this is relatively recently laid track. I will go through and weather it with weathering powders, but I don't want it to be super grimy because this is a relatively recent update of the Harvard Subdivision to move to this track. Now, the track is actually a triple track mainline in the actual world, but certainly not with modern, concrete ties, up to date infrastructure, those kinds of things. So you can see I'm slowly working my way around the layout, and you can tell from the clothes, again, this happened over multiple nights, right? Take a stretch at a time, commit myself to doing, 30 minutes of hobby time just to keep the progress going. You can see now I'm, cleaning the section, moving along, and it was nice to slowly see, again, inching closer. I found my motivation returning as, again, I could see, the progress happening in real time. So I made it, all the way around to, back to where it enters into the unfinished room, where eventually this is, the track that will take us to the helix to go up to the second level. But I also still had some work to do on the other side of the room, where the backdrops are already up. So you can see I used some foam that eventually will be used for scenery to shield the backdrops from any overspray, and then kept on working, making my way through. This was track that was laid summer of 2023, but I'm just now getting around to getting it painted and looking the way that I wanted to. But again, hopefully you can see from the fast sped up footage what I meant when I said this was tedious. It's not really exciting work. You want to run trains. This is not what gets you motivated to do the hobby. But I'm really glad in hindsight, now that it's done, that I did get it finished, because once I do go to work on scenery, it'll help just make it look that much more realistic. And I think that's really the biggest thing that I'm most concerned about right now, as you see me wrap up the last section of track to get painted, is just getting the sequence right in constructing the layout. Again, to make sure I'm not creating necessary work later. But now that this was done, there were some other things on my to-do list that I noticed that I didn't want to skip. One of the things you can see here, I had some extra roadbed. I had adjusted the alignment of the track after laying the roadbed, so I wanted to go back and get that unnecessary roadbed out of the way just to help there. But then on the flip side, here there was unnecessary roadbed that I needed to clean up that looked out of place. On the flip side, over here you can see I had again adjusted the track alignment to work out better, but I made the mistake of laying the roadbed down too soon, which meant that the track now was kind of slightly hanging off the roadbed, so I needed to put just a little bit of extra roadbed on. And you can see I needed to clean out the top of the glue there because I was really fighting hard. But I wanted to get this laid again now and not deal with it later because, again, that would just add a needless complication if I'm trying to do this at the point where I'm laying ground cover, ballast, those kinds of things. So really, again, my goal here was to try and be mindful of what are things that I should be taking care of now that will be much quicker and much easier to do now, but would be much more time intensive, much trickier if I wait and hold off and try and do these things later before I get to the next major development that I wanted to work on, which you'll see here in just a little bit, which will be, working on getting more of the backdrops up around the layout. So, the next thing I needed to test when I was filming the last episode, I had hit a dead spot on the tracks, right where you're going to see the P42 round the corner. Now, it was only on the middle track, so it was never on this outbound track. I'm doing this as a test just to make sure. I wanted to run because before I wanted to go back and tinker with the wiring, I wanted to see if it was truly a wiring issue or if it was just a connectivity issue because the track wasn't necessarily clean. Because after painting all the rails, again, I went through and scrubbed all the top rails. Well, as you can see, it's now moving through that section no problem, which kind of caught me by surprise. You see him running to grab it because I figured it would stall. And then, just for good measure, I then ran it backwards again to make sure you can see there's no stalls, there's no hiccups, it's running just fine. So again, I had on my to-do list, I thought it was a wiring issue. In hindsight, I realized I just didn't have clean track, and my simple the cleanup that I did after painting the rails solved that problem. Now, while I might have been unable to work, get hobby time in, that certainly didn't stop me from buying additional rolling stock and locomotives for the layout. I apologize, the focus isn't great on this clip at the start, but one of the things that I picked up was one of Scale Train's new SD42s. There's a couple other manufacturers that made these for CNW, but none of them really actually made it look like the actual, the CNW variant was pretty distinct, the bell on the front, the light on the top of the cab, and Scale Trains is the only one that actually made a CNW specific variant. Now, I'm going to have to work on getting this updated. I'm going to need to get ditch lights installed, obviously weather it quite a bit, because by 2014, which is the year the layout is currently operating in, it'll have seen some service. I also picked up some of these microtrains hoppers. These are perfect for my layout. They were one of the last produced rolling stock for the CNW prior to the merger. But as you can see, they have the modern hazard striping. You know what I'm talking about. Like it's one less step for me to have to apply those things. So I was excited to pick up a couple of these. As you can see, I'm putting them on the tracks. I was excited to get a couple of these. I think they're going to make a great addition. And there are some industries on the Harvard Subdivision that need this kind of rail car for their service. So it's not like I'm just picking it up to pick it up. You can see they didn't really want to play nice. Had to finagle it a little bit. It's not just picking it up for the sake of picking it up. They'll actually see use, not just as through freight, but actual serving online industries for what will be eventually up on the second level, as you'll see here in a little bit. So, I wanted to give it the run through, test out all the sounds, make sure it was running properly. The reason that I ran my P42 to test the track is because, the Kato units are great. They're workhorses. And it'd be really easy to determine if it was a track issue versus a locomotive issue. Because sometimes the scale trains locomotives, they're gorgeous, they're highly detailed, but they can be a little finicky. So I didn't want to use that to test the connectivity because it might have been an engine issue. But obviously you can see here, it's a gorgeous locomotive. Super happy with the purchase. Really glad that I got it. And I've got some additional acquisitions that I'll share with you in a little bit. The next item on my to-do list, though, was to fix, you can see here, one of the tracks on the lift-out section had gotten damaged. I had not cut it short enough, so the first time I went to go close the swing gate, the far end of the track clipped, and then it bowed as I tried to work, to the point where I could get the drop-down section. So I replaced the track, and then you can see here, I was able to put in the filler ties where the joints were, so I could get this done. This lift-out section was a culmination of all my least favorite things so far that I've done on the layout, because then obviously I had to paint the rails for this section, so I had, I guess one final section that I needed of the rails that I needed to paint. I thought it was done, and then I realized not so much. You can see I put some foam along the mainly to protect the walls. I don't want my walls to be brown. But you can see there, I had one final section, and I was able to get it done. And so now I can truly say that all of the track on the main level is the proper color, at least for the rails. I don't want to say weathered yet, because I need to go through with weathering patterns. I've got a plan for how I want to weather the track, but the rails are at least the color that I want them to be. Now it's time to do the actual thing I'm excited for, which is getting more of the backdrops down. I use Scenic King. They've been great, very reliable. I like the color. You can see I got the first one down. You can also see why it's really important that you make sure that your backdrop is smooth. There was one area that apparently I did not smooth out correctly. You can see that's not because of the paper right there where I'm touching. That's actually because of the backdrop. So unfortunately, I'm just going to have to live with it. I am planning on some hills and trees and stuff there that'll mask most of it. But then it was time to lay the next one. My battery was low on this, so you don't get to see in progress shots, sorry, but I wanted to make sure to show you the before and after. So this is before the second 6-foot backdrop section that I put down. This is the after, and you can see the massive difference that it's going to make. I wanted to go with like a low relief backdrop for this section. It's not actually going to be farmland. I just needed kind of a lower relief one for this is mainly a residential industrial area, and then you can see what it looked like to get the third backdrop section down. I need to put 2 more backdrops down to complete this, and then we'll be set on that. And unfortunately, I'm not able to get those additional backdrops up just yet because the company that I buy them from, Scenic King, is in Canada, and they're impacted by the postal strike going on in that country. So I've got them ordered. They're ready for me, but they're waiting for the strike resolution to get them shipped out, which is understandable because the alternatives are incredibly prohibitively expensive. So I'll tell you kind of what's in store as you watch. I had a special of the 400 with a couple executive cars on the back run up the line, as if they're kind of inspecting the progress, so you can kind of watch in the background and see that happen. So as the train's moving around to the newly backdropped area, the next major thing I'm going to work on actually is laying the core components for the second level. That's not necessarily because I'm about to jump to the second level, but I don't want to have that construction and debris from that construction impacting any scenery that I lay on the main floor. And more importantly, I need the plywood for the second level down so I can do the lighting, the top fascia, those things. So I want to get that infrastructure done so that way I can turn my attention back to the main level. And so that's kind of my next major goal. I think it'll certainly represent some major progress forward, but candidly this video was major progress forward because, like I said, it had been months since I had done any meaningful work on the layout, and now I was able to take a couple of huge steps forward, getting the track painting done and getting a lot of the backdrops down. So thank you for following this journey. Please make sure to like and subscribe, and we'll see you for the next one.